Imagine going to the hospital with a broken arm. You walk into the emergency room, right, and you're holding your shattered wrist.
You're in absolute agony, obviously expecting help.
Exactly. And the doctor takes one look at you, but instead of setting the bone or, ordering an x-ray, the doctor just writes in your chart that you're being overly dramatic.
Wow, that's incredibly dismissive.
Right. But it gets worse. Because your crying is disturbing the peace of the waiting room, the doctor intentionally breaks your other arm to teach you a lesson about composure.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that is the medical equivalent of what we are looking at today in this deep dive. We are looking at a system that doesn't just ignore an injury, it actively penalizes the injured person for bleeding.
And, that penalty isn't an accident. It's actually built into the architecture of the institutions themselves.
Which is terrifying when you really dig into the stack of sources we have for you today.
Yeah, we are examining a sprawling collection of sources. We've got legal filings, witness statements, forensic audio reports, and court transcripts from April and May of 2026.
And they all circle around one central figure, a woman named Stephanie LaRocque.
Right, and what these documents reveals is basically a horrifying stress test of the justice system. It's a masterclass in how coercive control can actually recruit police and courts to act as an extension of the abuser.
I read through these files, and honestly, the best way I can conceptualize this is that the justice system is running on an algorithm trained on bad data.
Hmm. How do you mean?
Well, its primary variable for determining the truth is calmness. Like if you input a calm lie and a frantic truth, the machine will output a guilty verdict for the victim every single time.
Because the base code is fundamentally flawed.
Exactly. So our mission today is to tear down that base code. We're going to look at severe police errors, systemic bias, and just a profound miscarriage of justice.
We are going to set the record straight on the facts the system actively chose to get wrong.
Which means we need to start by establishing the baseline reality of who Stephanie LaRocque actually is, completely divorced from the narrative that was weaponized against her.
Right. Before any of this legal machinery ground her down, you have to know that Stephanie had zero criminal record. None whatsoever.
She is a mother to two boys, Jacob and Ross, and there is a critical piece of chronological context here that we cannot gloss over.
Yeah, Stephanie raised her older son, Jacob, entirely as a single mother for 4 years before she even met the man who would become her ex-husband, Michael Broughton.
We don't want to pause right there because that feels incredibly important. Like, if a court is going to later entertain allegations that a mother is fundamentally unfit or
Which
alienating,
they did.
right, then the fact that she successfully and independently raised her child for 4 years seems like the ultimate counter evidence. She has a documented, verifiable history of capability.
It is the ultimate counter evidence, and that is exactly why the system's narrative had to work so hard to suppress it.
Yeah, they had to ignore reality.
They did, but to understand the sheer physical endurance required for Stephanie to even survive this ordeal, you really have to understand her medical reality.
Right, because she's sick. Very sick.
Yes. Right now, Stephanie is battling terminal stage 4 chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD.
And the files specifically mention hypercapnia. I had to look that up, actually. What does that actually mean for a person on a day-to-day basis?
So, hypercapnia is a condition where there is too much carbon dioxide in the blood.
Okay.
In a healthy respiratory system, you breathe in oxygen and your lungs efficiently exchange it, expelling carbon dioxide when you exhale. But with severe COPD, the lungs lose that elasticity.
So they can't push the bad air out.
Exactly. They become inflamed and damaged. So the carbon dioxide just gets trapped, it builds up in the bloodstream, and it causes severe shortness of breath, chronic fatigue, headaches, confusion.
That sounds terrifying.
It feels quite literally like you are slowly suffocating. Your body is constantly screaming in a state of physiological panic because it cannot clear the toxic gas from its own system.
So she is fighting for her breath every single second of every day.
Yes, she is.
Wow. So you have a woman in a state of perpetual terminal physiological panic. And while she is suffocating, she is simultaneously fighting a system that has allowed her children to be stolen from her.
It's an unimaginable burden.
It really is, and I want to clear up the biggest misconception in these files right out of the gate. This is our first major correction to the record today.
Let's do it.
The paper generated by the police and Michael Broughton paints a picture of parental alienation committed by Stephanie. But the primary source evidence shows the exact opposite.
The actual emails, the witness testimonies, the dates, they all point the other way.
Right. The deliberate psychological manipulation to destroy the children's relationship with their parent was entirely committed by the father, Michael Broughton, not Stephanie.
It is a textbook clinical execution of Darvo.
Break that down for the listener. What is Darvo?
For those who aren't familiar with the psychology of abuse, DARVO stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender.
Okay, so it's a specific tactic.
Yes, it is a highly specific, documented strategy used by perpetrators. They don't just deny they did something wrong. They actively project their own exact abusive behaviors onto the victim.
So they basically accuse the victim of doing the exact things they are doing?
Precisely. They create a smoke screen so thick that untrained or overworked authorities just can't see the original fire.
And that's what happened here.
Yeah, Michael Broughton engaged in severe parental alienation, but through a calm, calculated presentation, he managed to convince the authorities that Stephanie was the one doing it.
I'm struggling to understand this. I mean, family courts deal with messy divorces and custody battles every single day, right?
That is their primary function, yes.
So it's their literal job to spot liars and manipulative parents. How are you telling me a specialized system couldn't see through a guy who literally put his alienation plan in an email?
Because the system is looking for the wrong cues. They are relying on that algorithm of calmness you mentioned earlier.
Ah, right, the composure thing.
Exactly. Michael is composed. He files the paperwork neatly. Meanwhile, the victim, Stephanie, is frantic because she's losing her kids and her health.
But let's look at that email I mentioned because it is staggering. We have an email dated December 22, 2023.
Right, I'm looking at it too.
In this email, Michael explicitly, in writing, states his intent to alienate the children from Stephanie. It isn't subtext, it is a stated strategy.
And the psychological devastation on the kids is catastrophic. The sources detail that the younger son, Ross, who has a disability, has been in and out of the hospital with suicidal ideation.
That breaks my heart.
And the records are crystal clear on the timeline. This suicidal ideation never existed before Michael manipulated the children into leaving Stephanie's home.
So the timeline is essentially the smoking gun here.
Absolutely. Prior to the separation and the active alienation campaign, these severe mental health crises in the youngest child were completely absent.
And didn't the kids actually state their preference at one point?
Yes, we have records indicating that the children themselves actually told the office of the children's lawyer that they preferred to reside with their mother for 80% of the time.
Wow. 80%.
Yeah, they cited a happier, safer home environment with Stephanie. But despite the children's stated wishes and despite the written evidence of Michael's intent, Stephanie hasn't seen or spoken to her children in over 2 years.
I want you, the listener, to just try to hold the weight of that for a second. Imagine your body is failing you.
You're on supplemental oxygen.
Your blood is toxic with carbon dioxide. And the children you raise, the children whose lives revolved around you, are just erased from your daily existence.
It's just horrific. How does a person survive that level of institutional gaslighting?
Well, we have a witness statement in the file from a woman named Tracy Spano, who actually lived with Stephanie. And her perspective is crucial here.
Right, because it cuts through the bureaucratic noise. Tracy Spano provides a vital, grounded, third-party perspective.
Because she was actually in the house.
Exactly. She saw the daily mechanics of Stephanie's life. In her sworn statement, she confirms Stephanie's deeply loving relationship with her kids.
And she also addresses the drug accusations, right?
She unequivocally states there was absolutely zero drug use by Stephanie, which completely dismantles one of the primary smears Michael was feeding to the authorities.
And Tracy makes this brilliant observation. She says that when Michael describes Stephanie to the police, when he calls her unstable, manipulative, financially abusive, he is actually giving a highly accurate description of his own behavior.
Yeah, she is basically giving the police his own psychological profile and slapping Stephanie's name on it.
It's Darvo so blatant, it almost feels like a taunt, like he's daring them to figure it out.
And Tracy isn't just an observer of the emotional dynamic, she's an observer of the medical reality, too.
Right, she talks about that incident in October.
Yes, she recounts a terrifying incident in October 2024 where Stephanie went into complete respiratory failure. Tracy literally had to perform CPR to save Stephanie's life.
Oh my God.
This establishes, beyond any shadow of a doubt, the absolute life or death severity of Stephanie's medical condition.
Which, as we'll see, makes the later actions of the Ottawa police and the family court not just negligent, but actively cruel.
Truly cruel.
So if the family court failed, let's look at the first line of defense here, the police. We need to transition to the role of the Ottawa Police Service, or the OPS.
Let's do it.
Because as I read these police reports, it became painfully obvious that they didn't conduct an investigation. They conducted a confirmation bias exercise.
That is the perfect way to phrase it.
Stephanie didn't just walk into the police station with a vague he said, she said story. She walked in carrying mountains of hard, exculpatory evidence.
Let's catalog exactly what the Ottawa police chose to ignore. She brought them video evidence. In this video, you can see Stephanie checking the back of her head, which is bleeding.
And you can hear him in the background, right?
Yes. Clearly audible, you hear Michael's voice calling her stupid. She also brought them audio recordings where Michael explicitly threatens to, quote, beat her to a pulp.
And there were emails, too.
Yes, she brought them email confessions originating from his official Rogers email account. This wasn't circumstantial evidence. This was direct, primary evidence of intimate partner violence.
And the police essentially threw it in the trash. I really need to understand the mechanics of this failure. The sources mention an intimate partner violence, or IPV, framework.
Yes, the IPV framework.
Stephanie actually wrote a research memo detailing how the police violated their own protocols. Walk me through this. If a case is flagged as intimate partner violence, what is actually supposed to happen under the hood of a police department?
So in Ontario, when a police service classifies a case as family violence, which the OPS officially did in this case, by the way, a very specific mandatory set of investigative protocols is legally triggered.
Okay, so it's not optional.
Not at all. This isn't a set of gentle guidelines or best practices. It is a systemic, mandatory requirement designed to prevent exactly what happened to Stephanie.
Because they know these cases are complex.
Exactly. The framework is built to recognize that abusers lie, that victims are traumatized, and that standard investigative techniques are just insufficient.
Okay, so the alarms are pulled, the red lights are flashing, the IPV framework is triggered. What did the OPS actually do?
They failed on every conceivable front. First, the standard procedure dictates that the police must take a comprehensive statement from both parties.
Makes sense.
But no statement was ever sought or obtained from Stephanie. They didn't even ask for her side of the narrative.
That is insane.
Second, the police falsely declared her unreachable in their reports.
Wait, unreachable. How do you declare someone unreachable when they are actively trying to hand you video and audio evidence of their abuse?
By deliberately or negligently logging the wrong phone number in the file.
Are you kidding me?
No, if you call a dead number, you can check the administrative box that says attempted contact, and you wash your hands of it.
That is so incredibly lazy.
And third, perhaps most egregiously, they completely ignored the extensive family court record. Detective Jessica McFadden was the officer on the style.
Right, I remember seeing her name a lot.
Her own notes confirm that her review was limited to the CAD call, officer reports, CPIC, and the screenshots provided by Michael.
Back up for a second. Explain those acronyms for me. CAD and CPIC. What are those, and why does it matter that she only looked at them?
CAD stands for Computer Aided Dispatch. It's basically the 911 log. It tells you who called, what time, and the brief summary the dispatcher typed out.
Okay. And CPIC.
CPIC is the Canadian Police Information Center. It's the national database for criminal records, warrants, and active peace bonds.
So by only looking at the CAD call, her fellow officers' initial reports, CPIC, and Michael's selective screenshots, she's missing the whole picture.
Right. Detective McFadden was only looking at the surface-level administrative data. She completely ignored the underlying family court history.
Which would have shown her everything.
Exactly. If she had looked at the family court files, she would have seen Michael's repeated, documented history of non-compliance with court orders. She would have seen the context of the coercive control.
But the most glaring failure, the one that really highlights the systemic rot here, is the ODORA contradiction. The sources focus heavily on this.
Yes, the ODORA tool.
What exactly is ODORA, and why is it the smoking gun for police negligence in this case?
ODORA stands for the Ontario Domestic Assault Risk Assessment. It is a critical, empirically validated tool used by police across the province to assess the statistical risk of future violence in domestic cases.
So it's like a checklist.
It's a 13-item checklist, and the criteria for even applying the ODORA tool are very straightforward. There must be an allegation of an assault, it must involve a male versus female relationship, and the couple must currently or previously have lived together.
And I'm looking at the police file right now. The police literally noted all of those criteria in their own report.
They absolutely did.
They acknowledged an alleged assault, a male-female dynamic, and a shared residence. The prerequisites were met. Yet, under the mandatory ODORA assessment section, they marked it as not applicable.
Yeah.
How is that even possible? How does a mandatory risk assessment in a recognized family violence case get marked not applicable when the baseline criteria are staring them in the face?
It happens when an institution chooses administrative convenience over victim safety. When you bypass ODORA, you avoid documenting the abuser's history in a standardized, trackable way.
So it keeps the paperwork light.
Yes. You prevent the case from being flagged as high risk. It allows the police to legally downgrade the situation in their system.
It lets them maintain the narrative that this is just a messy divorce.
Or a civil matter rather than a documented high-risk case of intimate partner violence. Marking it not applicable isn't a clerical error. It is a willful bypass of protocol to protect the abuser's narrative.
There is a moment in Tracy Spano's witness statement that just freezes your blood, because it proves that this wasn't accidental negligence. It was intentional hostility.
Yes, the phone call.
Stephanie actually manages to get Detective Jessica McFadden on the phone. And Stephanie asks her a deeply logical, desperate question. She asks, if you find out Michael Broughton is lying, will you finally hold him accountable?
And we know exactly how the detective responded.
Without hesitation. Immediate, she just said no.
That single syllable tells you everything you need to know about the institutional mindset of the Ottawa Police Service in this case.
The investigation was dead on arrival.
It wasn't an inquiry into facts. It was the processing of a file based on a predetermined narrative. Once they decided Michael, the calm, polite guy, was the victim, no amount of evidence was going to alter their trajectory.
Not audio, not video, not medical records, nothing.
Nothing.
I want to illustrate exactly how deeply this bias ran with the story of Moji the dog. This isn't just about a pet. It is a masterclass in how police apply the law selectively based on who they like.
Let's hear it.
Stephanie purchased Moji in 2018, legally, post-separation. In the eyes of the law, a dog is considered chattel. It's property.
Right.
And Stephanie had all the paperwork to prove ownership, the veterinary records, the health insurance, the municipal registration. Fast forward to July 31, 2022, and Michael unlawfully takes Moji from Stephanie's property.
Which, under the criminal code, is theft. Plain and simple.
Right, so Stephanie does exactly what society tells you to do. She gathers her legal documentation, and she reports the theft to the OPS.
And what do the police do?
They shrug, they look at her legally documented evidence of ownership and dismiss it as a civil matter. They tell her to take it up in family court. They refuse to intervene.
Because treating it as a crime would require disrupting Michael's narrative and acknowledging him as an aggressor.
Exactly. But hold on, the hypocrisy is staggering here. Almost a year later, on June 30, 2023, Stephanie finally manages to locate and retrieve her own dog from Michael's property.
Okay.
And what happens? Michael calls the police. And suddenly, it's no longer a civil matter. The police immediately charge Stephanie with broken enter and theft.
Unbelievable.
They literally charged the legal documented owner with stealing her own property, based entirely on the uncorroborated word of her abuser.
This is a textbook, a glaring example of a charter violation. Specifically, Section 15 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which guarantees equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination.
Right.
The police treated Michael's Verdal claims as absolute actionable truth worthy of bringing the full weight of the criminal code down on a dying woman.
While ignoring her actual papers.
Yes. Simultaneously, they treated Stephanie's documented, verified legal evidence of ownership as an annoying civil dispute. It is selective enforcement driven by intense bias.
It's like a librarian who is tasked with organizing an archive of historical documents. But instead of reading the documents, the librarian pre-writes a summary for the back cover of a book.
I like this analogy.
Thanks. Then, any document that contradicts that pre-written summary gets thrown in the trash, and any document that supports it gets framed on the wall. They pre-wrote the story of Stephanie Larocque, and the truth was simply an inconvenience.
Which brings us to a massive asymmetry in this case that we have to unpack, because it's crucial.
Yeah, how did he pull this off?
To understand how Michael was able to manipulate the evidence so effectively, and how he fed that librarian the exact right documents, we need to look at his technical expertise.
Right.
Michael Broughton isn't just a guy who knows his way around an iPhone. He is a senior Oracle programmer.
And for the listener who might not work in tech, explain what that means. What level of digital literacy are we talking about here?
Oracle is one of the largest, most complex database management systems in the world. Being a senior programmer in that environment means you possess highly specialized technical skills.
So he's not just using basic software.
Not at all. You understand digital architecture, network environments, data structures, and data manipulation at a fundamental level. You understand how digital footprints are created, and more importantly, how they can be altered or obscured.
So he's an expert.
His technical capability is light years beyond the average person, and certainly far beyond the average beat cop or family court judge.
And the sources show he weaponized those skills to enact digital coercive control. He admitted to installing hidden cameras in the house.
Yes.
We have audio recordings where he explicitly tells Stephanie, they can all see you, I put cams in the house. He was conducting psychological warfare.
He was creating a panopticon.
Exactly. An environment of constant invisible surveillance where Stephanie could never feel safe, never let her guard down, and never know when she was being recorded.
And this brings us to one of the most egregious mischaracterizations by the police that we need to aggressively correct on the record. This is our second major correction.
Let's get into it.
Stephanie knew she was being surveilled. She knew Michael was gaslighting her. She knew he was layering synthetic noise like the sound of fans, static, or traffic over audio files to obscure his own abusive statements or to make her sound irrational.
But she didn't have the technical background to separate those audio layers on her own, right?
Exactly. So she turned to artificial intelligence.
Which is brilliant. It's a highly logical response to a complex technical problem. But the police took her AI analysis and baselessly dismissed it as doctored.
Yes, they did.
I want to be incredibly precise here. What exactly did Stephanie do, and why is the word doctored so deeply defamatory?
Well, Stephanie was entirely 100% transparent about her methodology. She used OpenAI's advanced data analysis model.
Okay.
She didn't use it to generate fake voices. She used it as a forensic tool to clean and analyze the data she already had. She used it to generate spectrograms, waveform analyses, and pitch studies.
Okay, stop there. Explain those terms like I've never opened an audio file in my life. What is a spectrogram, and what does a waveform analysis actually do?
Sure, sound travels in waves. A waveform analysis is essentially a graph that looks at the amplitude or the loudness of those sound waves over time. It shows you the peaks and valleys of volume.
Okay, that makes sense. And a spectrogram.
A spectrogram goes much deeper. It is a visual representation of the spectrum of frequencies of a signal as it varies with time. Think of it like a visual fingerprint of a sound.
Interesting.
Human voices have distinct frequency patterns. Environmental noise has different patterns. If someone uses a noise gate or a compression algorithm to hide a voice behind the sound of a humming refrigerator, the human ear might just hear the hum.
But the computer can see the difference.
Exactly. A spectrogram will visually separate the frequency of the human vocal cords from the frequency of the appliance.
So she uses AI to essentially put a magnifying glass over these audio files. And what did the AI find?
It yielded incredible, undeniable results. It proved that a female voice hidden in one of the highly distorted recordings, a voice distinctly saying, "Couldn't miss this one, Steph," was a definitive voice print match to Michael's romantic contact, a woman named Lonnie Huck.
Wow.
But it went further. The AI found what are called null byte blocks.
Null byte blocks. Again, ELI5. Explain it like I'm 5.
In computing, a byte is a unit of data. A null byte is a byte with a value of 0. It represents nothingness.
Okay.
When an audio file is naturally recorded, it's a continuous stream of data. If you go into an audio editing software and purposefully delete a section of the recording, the software doesn't just pull the ends together perfectly.
It leaves a scar.
Yes, it often leaves a microscopic gap of null bytes, a block of zeros where data used to be. The AI detected these null byte blocks, which strongly suggests purposeful manual deletions.
So someone went in and chopped it up.
Precisely. It also found frequency destructions that prove audio cloaking, where synthetic frequencies are artificially introduced to mask specific sounds.
This is robust, scientifically sound forensic work. She is using cutting-edge data analysis to uncover digital abuse.
Yes.
He hands this to the Ottawa police, fully disclosing exactly how the AI generated the reports. And the police, instead of bringing in their own cybercrime unit to verify the findings, just glance at it and label it doctored.
To call a transparent forensic analysis doctored is defamatory. Doctoring implies malicious intent to forge or deceive.
And she wasn't hiding anything?
Not at all. Stephanie wasn't deceiving anyone. She was acting as her own forensic investigator because the police refused to do it.
Right.
She was desperately trying to strip away the deception that Michael, a senior programmer, had coded into the files. The police labeling it doctored is purely a mechanism to avoid having to understand the technology.
But the absurdity doesn't stop with the audio. The police's confirmation bias was so extreme that they actually labeled an unfiled draft of her family court motion as doctored.
That part is just mind-boggling.
I literally had to read that sentence in the sources 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. How can a draft of a legal document be doctored? It's a draft.
It's a logical impossibility.
Exactly. A draft is inherently a work in progress. It is a document you are actively writing, revising, deleting, and editing on your own computer hard drive.
Right.
You cannot forge your own rough draft. A file system simply saves the latest version of your keystrokes. What does this tell us about the investigative mindset of Detective McFadden and the OPS?
It reveals a profound state of institutional procedural inertia. The police had fully internalized Michael's Darvo narrative. They believed Stephanie was unstable, manipulative, and a liar.
So everything she submitted was painted in their eyes.
Therefore, every single piece of evidence she submitted had to be retrofitted to serve that narrative. If she submits complex AI audio analysis that proves Michael is cloaking audio, they don't understand the spectrogram, so they just stamp it doctored.
And the draft.
If she submits a draft motion that outlines her abuse and it contradicts their view of her as the aggressor, they stamp it doctored. They penalized her for investigating her own abuse.
So if the police refuse to investigate, and in fact actively criminalize your attempts to defend yourself, your absolute last line of defense is the court system.
The courts are supposed to be the fail-safe.
You have to hope that a judge will finally look in the evidence objectively. Which brings us to the trial in April 2026. And the physical and administrative reality of this courtroom is grueling.
It really is.
Stephanie's entirely self-represented. She had to fire her lawyer, Bruce Engel. Why was she forced to navigate a criminal trial alone while dying of COPD?
Because the legal profession often fails to accommodate severe disabilities. The transcripts indicate that Bruce Engel failed to accommodate Stephanie's intense medical needs.
He wasn't helping her.
No. He seemed far more aligned with moving the administrative machinery of the court along pleasing the judge, keeping the schedule moving, than fiercely defending a client who required significant, time-consuming medical accommodations. So she is alone.
She is facing charges of criminal harassment and breach of a peace bond. And let's be clear about what these charges are actually based on.
People assume it's stalking or violence.
Right. But they aren't. They are based on emails. Emails she sent to Michael that were solely focused on trying to maintain contact with her children, who he was actively alienating from her.
The act of a mother trying to reach her children was weaponized into criminal harassment.
And we have to place this legal battle in the context of her physical body. A courtroom is a sterile, rigid, intimidating environment designed for healthy people. During the April 24th proceedings, the transcript shows Stephanie in acute, visible medical distress. Her hypercapnia is flaring. She is literally gasping for air on the record. She tells the judge, "Somebody's supposed to be bringing me some Ventolin right now."
And how does the court react? Do they halt the proceedings? Do they call for medical assistance?
No, they treat her terminal illness like it is a fledgling inconvenience. Justice Berg, the judge presiding over this trial, actually says on the record, well, it is at least 15 minutes, right? I think we bow to the inevitable at this point. She appears to be in distress, but she still has to be present.
The lack of basic human empathy is shocking, but the legal failure is even worse.
Right.
A trial judge has a strict legal duty under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and under common law principles of procedural fairness to accommodate an accused person's physical and mental disabilities.
This is not a courtesy, it is a right.
Exactly. Accommodation could mean delayed start times, flexible scheduling, frequent and extended breaks, or allowing the accused to participate remotely.
But she got none of that.
Instead, she is subjected to administrative hostility. The judge views her need to breathe as an interruption of his docket.
And this hostility sets the stage for what is undeniably the most malicious, sociopathic act we see in the entire courtroom saga. It happens on April 30, 2026.
This is our third critical correction for the record today.
Yes, this is the moment where Michael Broughton's manipulation and the judge's bias perfectly align to crush Stephanie. Walk us through the smoke break lie.
During a recess in the trial, Stephanie suffers a severe acute COPD medical emergency. The hypercapnia causes extreme nausea, and she is violently ill. She is in the courthouse bathroom vomiting.
Just awful.
The situation is so severe that the amicus curiae actually has to intervene and notify the judge.
Wait, clarify that term for the listener. What is an amicus curiae, and why is it significant that they were the ones reporting this?
Amicus curiae translates to friend of the court. It is an independent lawyer appointed by the judge, usually in cases where an accused is self-represented, to ensure fairness and assist the court with legal arguments.
So they are neutral.
Yes, they do not represent the Crown or the defense, so when the neutral amicus curiae reports to the judge, "I'm sick to my stomach in the bathroom," quoting Stephanie's condition, it is an objective verification of a severe medical event.
But Michael Broughton sees an opportunity here.
He does.
He is sitting in the courtroom, watching his ex-wife vomit from a terminal lung disease, and he decides to maliciously lie to Justice Byrd. He claims, casually, that Stephanie was just taking a smoke break.
It is a highly calculated, devastatingly effective lie. Stephanie has terminal COPD. She is on oxygen. She does not smoke.
And he knew that.
Michael, having been married to her for years, absolutely categorically knew she did not smoke, but he planted that specific lie to reframe her uncontrollable physiological illness as a behavioral choice.
He framed her emergency as a disrespectful, truant act.
And the most tragic part is that the lie works instantly. It poisons the judge's perception completely.
Justice Berg doesn't verify the claim. He doesn't ask the amicus.
No, he accepts the abuser's lie as gospel, and he cruelly mocks a dying woman right there on the official court record.
I have the quote right here. Justice Berg states, "She disappears after breaks, saying she feels ill, not having displayed any signs of illness beyond congestion prior."
It is breathtakingly cynical. A judge, tasked with uncovering the truth, accepts an unverified, malicious lie from the complainant over the glaring medical reality of a woman vomiting in the courthouse bathroom.
I have to step out of the narrator role for a second and just express the sheer outrage of this on behalf of anyone listening.
It's infuriating.
To weaponize a terminal, suffocating illness, to lie to a judge to make a dying woman look like a teenager trying to skip class behind the bleachers, it is profound cruelty.
It really is.
And for the judge to follow it so willingly shows how eager the system is to punish victims for not being composed.
From a strict legal standpoint, this moment destroys the integrity of the trial. It creates what appellate courts call a reasonable apprehension of bias.
What does that mean legally?
The test is whether a reasonable, informed person, viewing the matter realistically and practically, would think it more likely than not that the decision-maker, whether consciously or unconsciously, would not decide fairly.
And I think any reasonable person would see the bias here.
Justice Berg failed to accommodate a severely disabled litigant entirely because his view of her was tainted by the complainant's calculated lies. Once the judge believed she was faking her distress for smoke breaks, every single subsequent request for a medical accommodation, every gasp for air, was viewed as an obstruction of justice.
The trial was structurally, fundamentally unfair from that exact moment onward.
Precisely.
So let's look at the actual mechanics of the Crown's case against Stephanie. Let's look at the evidence they presented to try and secure a criminal conviction against this woman.
This brings us to correction number 4.
Right. On May 4, 2026, the Crown rested its case. But there was a glaring, massive evidentiary void. Something or rather, someone was completely missing.
The Crown rested its case after calling exactly one witness, the complainant, Michael Broughton.
Just him.
Not a single police officer took the stand. Detective McFadden never testified. No one from the Ottawa Police Service was called to authenticate the evidence or explain the investigation.
I'm not a lawyer, but even I know that is incredibly bizarre. If you are prosecuting a criminal case based on digital evidence, emails, screenshots, alleged breaches of a peace bond, don't you need the investigating officer to establish the chain of custody?
It is highly irregular. In a standard criminal trial involving digital evidence, the investigating officer is the foundational pillar of the Crown's case.
Because they have to prove where the evidence came from.
Exactly. The officer must testify to establish how the evidence was collected, how it was stored, and the steps taken to verify the complaint. They have to prove that the screenshot of an email presented in court is an accurate, unaltered representation of the original data.
And Stephanie, despite suffering from hypercapnia, despite being entirely self-represented and mocked by the judge, executes an absolutely brilliant legal maneuver here.
She really does.
She recognizes this massive flaw. She brings a motion for a directed verdict of acquittal on both counts. And she cites a highly specific precedent, R.V. Shremsky.
That's right.
Break down this legal theory for us. Why is this motion so powerful?
R.V. Shremsky is a vital Supreme Court of Canada case. It established the definitive test for a directed verdict.
What is a directed verdict exactly?
A directed verdict is essentially a request for the judge to throw the case out before it even goes to a defense because the Crown's evidence is so weak that a conviction is legally impossible.
Okay, so she's saying they have no case.
Right, the Shremsky test asks. Taking the Crown's evidence at its absolute highest, is there any evidence upon which a properly instructed jury could reasonably return a guilty verdict?
And Stephanie correctly argued that the answer was no.
Because the Crown left massive, insurmountable evidentiary gaps.
Let's talk about those gaps, specifically regarding digital evidence, because Michael just handed in screenshots, right?
Exactly. And a screenshot is nothing but a JPEG image. It is incredibly easy to alter a JPEG. You can change text, dates, and sender addresses in seconds.
Especially if you're a senior programmer.
Yes. Because the police never testified, there was no verified chain of custody. The police never seized Michael's computer. They never pulled the original .eml files from the server.
So no proof it was real.
There was no metadata, no exif data, no hash values to prove the files were unmodified. The Crown was asking a judge to convict a woman of a crime based on unauthenticated pictures provided by her abuser.
Which begs the massive multi-million-dollar question, why wouldn't the Crown call the investigating officers?
It's the big question.
If the Crown knows they need to authenticate the evidence, why would they intentionally hide their own police force? Were they afraid of what Stephanie would uncover on cross-examination?
It is the only logical, strategic inferences you can draw. In a criminal trial, if the Crown puts Detective McFadden on the stand, the defense, even a self-represented defense, has the absolute constitutional right to cross-examine her.
And Stephanie would have dismantled her.
Completely. Stephanie could have handed her the Oduro protocol and asked under oath, why did you mark this mandatory risk assessment as not applicable?
Oh, that would have been devastating.
She could have brought up the AI audio analysis and asked, what is a null byte block, detective? You called this doctored. Explain the technical basis for that conclusion.
The detective wouldn't have been able to answer.
Not at all. She could have exposed the complete lack of IPV protocols, the ignored video evidence, and the dog theft hypocrisy to open judicial scrutiny.
So by hiding the police, the Crown inadvertently gutted its own case. They knew they couldn't risk the police investigation being put under a microscope because the investigation was a sham.
They sacrificed their own evidentiary foundation to protect the Ottawa Police Service from embarrassment and potential civil liability.
It is astounding institutional cowardice.
It highlights how institutions will protect themselves at the expense of the truth, which brings us to the underlying sociology of this entire nightmare.
Why did the police believe Michael? Why did the judge believe the smoke break lie?
Stephanie actually wrote about this. Included in the source documents is a profound, incredibly insightful essay she authored titled The Myth of Calm.
And honestly, this essay is the philosophical key that unlocks this entire deep dive. It explains the algorithm of bad data we talked about at the very beginning.
It does.
What is the core thesis of the myth of calm?
Stephanie's central argument is that our justice systems and society at large consistently mistake composure for credibility.
Okay.
We are culturally conditioned to believe that the truth is delivered calmly, rationally, and linearly. Conversely, we are conditioned to believe that a trembling voice, visible distress, or disjointed storytelling are indicators of deception or instability.
And she backs this up with hard science. She doesn't just theorize, she brings receipts. She cites psychological research by Charles Bond and Bella DePaulo. These are researchers who conducted massive, comprehensive meta-analyses on human deception detection.
Bond and DePaulo analyzed hundreds of studies involving tens of thousands of participants. They wanted to know, how good are human beings, including highly trained police officers, detectives, and judges, at detecting when someone is lying based on their demeanor?
And the result is terrifying. They found that human beings correctly identify deception only about 54% of the time.
54%.
That is barely better than a coin flip.
Precisely. Relying on someone's demeanor, whether they are calm, whether they make eye contact, whether they fidget, is scientifically baseless. It is junk science.
Yet it is the primary metric used by police arriving in a domestic disturbance and judges sitting on a bench.
Furthermore, Stephanie cites foundational trauma experts in her essay. She references Judith Herman, the legendary psychiatrist who wrote Trauma and Recovery, and Dessel van der Kolk, the author of The Body Keeps the Score.
Explain how trauma processing factors into this 54% coin flip. Why does a victim look like a liar to a cop?
Because trauma fundamentally alters the architecture of the brain, specifically how memory is processed and how speech is generated. Under acute stress or trauma, the brain's amygdala, the fear center, hijacks the system.
Okay, so it goes into survival mode.
It prioritizes immediate survival. It suppresses the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for logical, linear storytelling. Therefore, true victims of trauma often recall events in fragmented, nonlinear, emotionally volatile ways.
They might forget details, loop back on themselves, or become visibly agitated when trying to explain what happened.
Yes, they are telling the absolute, unfiltered truth, but their brain's trauma response makes them look inconsistent to a judge demanding a neat, linear narrative.
Exactly. Now, compare that to the abuser. The abuser is not traumatized. They are not in fear for their life. They are controlling the situation.
Therefore, their prefrontal cortex is fully online. They can rehearse their performance. They can construct a perfectly linear, rational, and incredibly calm narrative.
This maps perfectly onto Michael Broughton. He is highly skilled at emotional control, digital manipulation, and gaslighting.
He played the part perfectly.
To Detective McFadden and to Justice Berg, Michael appeared cooperative, reasonable, and polite. He was performing the role of the calm, upstanding citizen.
Meanwhile, Stephanie is suffering from terminal COPD. She is enduring chronic psychological terror, and she is grieving the agonizing forced loss of her children.
Of course she appeared volatile. Her life was being violently dismantled. but the system punished her for bleeding while rewarding him for holding the knife calmly.
Stephanie also introduces a brilliant concept from sociologist Diane Vaughan called the normalization of deviance.
Oh, I found this part fascinating.
Vaughan famously studied the Challenger space shuttle disaster. She noted how NASA engineers gradually accepted small anomalies like the O-rings failing slightly below expectations as normal.
Because fixing the problem was too difficult.
Exactly. They normalized the deviancy until a catastrophic failure occurred.
How does the Challenger disaster apply to the Ottawa police or the family courts?
Large institutions prefer manageable narratives. They are vast administrative machines designed to process high caseloads efficiently.
Right.
A calm abuser presenting a neat stack of fabricated JPEG screenshots is administratively easy to process. A traumatized complex victim demanding a thorough investigation into Oracle databases, null byte blocks, audio cloaking, and coercive control is administratively difficult.
It requires specialized knowledge and time the system doesn't want to spend.
So the institutions normalize the deviance. The police accept the unauthenticated screenshots. The judge accepts the unverified smoke break lie. They quietly adapt to the procedural errors because correcting them requires too much friction. The system chooses efficiency over justice.
I want you, the listener, to really think about this dynamic in your own life. Think about your workplace, your extended family, or your local community.
It's everywhere.
How often do we, as human beings, automatically believe the person who speaks softly and calmly and immediately dismiss the person who is raising their voice or crying?
We are evolutionarily wired to seek out calm.
But this deep dive shows how that everyday human bias becomes catastrophic, literally life-destroying, when it is codified into the authority of the justice system.
It's a sobering realization. We are relying on an outdated, scientifically disproven metric of human behavior to dispense legal justice. We are using a 54% coin flip to decide who gets to keep their children and who goes to jail.
Let's recap the staggering weight of what Stephanie LaRock has endured, because when you stack it all up and view the entire machinery at work, it's almost too heavy to hold.
It really is.
She has had her children systematically and deliberately alienated from her by an ex-husband who put his plan in writing.
Her rigorous, transparent forensic AI evidence was falsely and baselessly smeared by police as doctored, simply because they didn't understand the technology.
Her terminal, suffocating illness was openly mocked by a judge because her abuser maliciously lied about a smoke break.
And she was forced to defend her freedom against a criminal case built on absolutely nothing but the uncorroborated, unauthenticated JPEG screenshots provided by her abuser.
While the Crown intentionally hid the investigating officers to cover up their own negligence.
Stephanie's story is a terrifying case study in systemic failure. It proves that when police willfully ignore mandatory IPv protocols, when they bypass tools like ODORA for administrative convenience, and when courts rely blindly on the myth of calm, the legal system ceases to be a shield.
Instead, it becomes a taxpayer-funded weapon.
The system literally does the abuser's coercive work for them. It finances and enforces their abuse.
We started this deep dive talking about broken arms in emergency rooms, about how we desperately want the diagnosis of truth to be clean, visible, and precise.
We want to believe the justice system is an objective X-ray machine.
But it isn't. It relies on flawed people relying on flawed algorithms of behavior. And when those people choose the comfort of a calm lie over the messy, frantic reality of a traumatized truth, the machine doesn't just break. It crushes innocent people.
It destroys lives.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything Stephanie LaRock has exposed about the architecture of our institutions.
What is it?
If our justice system is fundamentally designed to seek the truth, but is hardwired at its core to only listen to those who perform the truth calmly, how many other people are sitting in courtrooms right now, suffocating under the weight of a system that demands they smile politely while their lives are being stolen?
That is the question every single one of us needs to carry moving forward.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narrative.